Hi, my name is Michael Macpherson. I'm an information security specialist for a global law firm. I have spent 15 years in the British military, specialising in surveillance, reconnaissance, intelligence systems. I then moved into sort of network engineering, network and security systems, and found myself into cybersecurity within the last year. Cybersecurity is not just a case of hacking and antiviruses. They're components that make up cybersecurity. Essentially, cyber is related to computer systems. That's where the cyber terminology comes from. But if you think of it like your house, you don't leave your house without locking your doors. You don't leave your house without closing your windows. So it's protecting what's valuable to you, protecting what's inside your business, your organization, whether it be your critical systems, your assets, the people itself. It's just wrapping security controls around those to make sure that everything that's important to your business is protected. A lot of people talk about information security and cybersecurity as two separate entities. Essentially, information security is the old terminology for cybersecurity. Cyber is the new buzzword, it's more exciting, it gets people more interested. Essentially, I think historically information security is predominantly based around looking after data and protecting information itself and making sure that the confidentiality, integrity and availability of the data is looked after appropriately. I think that cyber now in the modern age is more about it's terminologies like hacking and protecting computers and systems and things like that. But for all intents and purposes, they're essentially one and the same thing, and cybersecurity encompasses information security and cybersecurity of systems as well. I think you can't be an expert in cybersecurity. It's impossible, and anyone that says they are is probably spinning the truth a little bit. I think it's about finding something that you're passionate about. So whether or not it's coding, whether or not it's auditing clients, it could be sort of cyber exercises such as red teaming, blue teaming, where you're testing the resiliency of an organization. It's ultimately finding something that interests you. As far as studying, again, it depends on what you want to do. So ultimately, speak to people in the industry like myself, get on events like Learning People, sort of networking events, speak to different people, find out what they do and what their job entails, and then sort of try and work out where you want to go. It took me sort of till now, and I've been in the industry 20 odd years, to work out what I actually want to do. And my current role isn't what I want to do, and that's why I'm moving on to an engineering position, because I love engineering, that's my background. So I'm becoming a security engineer again. So yeah, it's about, I wouldn't say swapping and changing what you do, but just find something that you're really passionate about and stick to it. That would depend on whether or not you're in the industry now, or you're just doing the course to try and get into the industry. I think if you're in the industry now, you need to think about where you're trying to get to in, say, 5 years. You need to sort of set that goal in mind and try and work towards that. So you take your ethical hacking, you go and become a junior pen tester if you're not one already, and you build up the skills you need to become a more senior penetration tester. That will then sort of naturally flow into sort of great work opportunities and things like that. I think if you're not in the industry, you need to try and start looking into how you break into the industry. So speaking to network peers again, looking for those junior penetration testing jobs. The information that I'm privy to, it is sensitive information. Every industry I've worked in carries that sort of sensitive information aspect, and it's remaining on the right side of the ethical sort of borderline that you have to understand that that's part of the job, unless you're actually going to be sort of a grey hat penetration tester where you're testing, and that's your role is to test the resiliency of organisations. There are certain sacrifices you need to make, but you need to understand what's important to you. I think for me it's time, and the reason I'm sort of deciding on a slight career path change now is because I value my time and I want time back so that I can pursue other opportunities. But ultimately, you don't have to make sacrifices, but just be prepared that it's not always a 9 to 5 position that you might get. I think that's a really interesting question as well. I think just people being aware of cybersecurity. It's down to the organisations to sort of build up that security awareness for their employees. If you don't have to go and start reading all the sort of news articles and threat intelligence feeds to understand cybersecurity, but I think if you listen to maybe one a month, one a week, just to find out more about the industry and find out what is important to your business, that's a great first step. Other than that, it's just understanding that there is risks out there, and also understanding what's important to your business and what's important to you. So from a personal perspective, it might be your financial information, because you don't want people taking money from your account. So therefore, you keep that under lock and key. You keep those details private to you. You don't write them on the back of your card. You don't have them on a piece of paper in your wallet. And the same transpires into business. You don't have your passwords for your critical systems under your keyboard. That still happens, trust me. But it's just understanding and being more aware of the threats that are around, to be honest. I think there's going to have to be a shift. I think a lot of technology is out there that helps protect organizations against cybersecurity. I've noticed a shift in the fact that a lot more people need to be able to code, and coding is so relevant nowadays, and it's more relevant in the cybersecurity sector because we need to use coding techniques to help us threat hunt the risks that are out there. We need to use coding techniques to help us analyze the logs that we're collecting. So this is a really important skill to have, and I think it's really relevant in the industry. 10 years ago, we didn't necessarily need it. It was something we used to actually just help our jobs be a bit more streamlined and save us a bit of time and effort. But nowadays, I think with the technology that we've got in place, it's going to be a really useful skill to have. It would be interesting to find out from the person who posed the question what security controls they have in their organisation at the moment internally, because the chances are most organisations who are frightened about cloud adoption haven't got the appropriate security controls in their organisation inside at the moment. So things you need to consider are, at a basic level is, how am I going to get the data from my current organisation to the cloud? Is that going to be encrypted? When it gets to the cloud, how do users access it? Are they going to have multi-factor authentication to tie that down so that only specific users can get it, and that their user credentials can't be sort of spoofed, for example? And then when it's in the cloud as well, is it encrypted while it's stored? So there's various different elements that can help secure cloud, but essentially the same principles that apply to cloud apply to current organizations. So I think there is a sort of a fear of cloud adoption by probably smaller organizations now, because a lot of the large financial institutions and the rest of the sector are doing it. But I think you need to speak to a cloud specialist or reach out to network peers in the industry and start to have really sort of succinct conversations about what you're trying to achieve as a business, and they will probably answer your questions. The interesting concept about that report and that sort of blog was that, from my perspective, they've only used their own testing facilities. They haven't actually opened it up out to the world and said, come and hack us, see if you can get in. And from my point of view, it's great that they're doing it in a controlled environment, and in that sort of little silo it seems to be hack-proof. But I would imagine that if they opened up to the world and then declared it as a hack-proof system, within a couple of weeks they'd probably find someone would have found a bug. And ultimately the technology might be amazing, and I think there was talk of using different cryptographic methods in the technology that sounds amazing as well, and it sounds pretty foolproof. But then it comes back to the people utilising it. And that's where a lot of criminals are using people as leverage to gain access to systems, because we can still be the weakest link, and we can still be persuaded and conned into giving credentials or giving information, and even bribed at some cases. So I think it would be interesting if they did the same exercise and opened it up as maybe a bug bounty program where they challenge people to try and get in, and then that would test the resiliency of the Air Force's platform. I'm in the industry, I'm in a very well-paid job, I'm in a very fortunate position, and that's predominantly because I've been able to use my sort of cross-training, as it were. So my previous skills and my experience, I've been able to cross-reference into the industry. At the Learning People recent event, I remember saying this to someone then, is, you may be in a certain field, but think about what skills you have and then transfer them into cyber, and then start articulating that in your CV and start articulating that to people, and you'll be surprised at what job opportunities open up for you. Also, I think don't stop being curious. You've got to be able to learn. You've got to be willing to learn. You've got to be willing to put the time in to dedicate outside of work to actually get yourself upskilled, whether it be coding, learning networking security, learning about cyber risks, cyber auditing, whatever field you choose, you've got to keep learning. You know, I probably read a book every month, and it may not be the most interesting book in the world, and I might take about 10% of the book away, but you've just got to keep going, you know, and the industry is going to keep changing. And one thing I remember from military training, you've always got to remain agile, and you've always got to stay 2 steps ahead. So you've got to keep thinking about the future. Like I mentioned before about DevOps and DevOps security, that's where the future's going, so start thinking about those. And another thing, don't be afraid to reach out to people like myself, because if I don't know the answer, I'll put you in touch with people who do know the answer, because through networking events that I've attended, like the Learning Peoples and other networking events, I've built up a great network of peers who are more than willing to help people get into the sector, or at least advise them on how to get into it. So don't stop trying.